Page 94A, top of the page. We're in the middle of something, so if you want to see the context, just please look at 93B. You know what? Might as well just start from the bottom of 93B. Why not? Don't always do this, but might as well just now since we have some time. Oh, you know what? We started a new Mishnah, so let's just start the new Mishnah. The bottom of 93B is the Mishnah. 93B, the Mishnah. We'll start from there. It's a new idea, okay? The Mishnah says that there is an aspect of greater stringency with regard to placing hands than there is with regard to waving. And there is an aspect of greater stringency with regard to waving than there is with regard to placing hands. The stringency with regard to placing hands is that if several people are partners in bringing an offering, one of them waves the offering on behalf of all the other partners, but one cannot fulfill the requirement of placing hands if he alone places hands on behalf of all the other partners. Rather, each member must place hands himself. The stringency with regard to waving is that waving is practiced in the cases of both offerings of an individual, for example, peace offerings where the breast and thigh and sacrificial portions are waved, and in the cases of communal offerings, for example, 2 lambs sacrificed in Shavuot, which are waved together with 2 loaves. Okay, that brings us to 94a, top. As is practiced in both in the cases of offerings when they are alive, for example, the guilt offering of a leper, and that's the 6th parsha, the leper and the lambs of Shavuot, and in the cases of offerings after they are slaughtered, for example, the breast and the thigh. By contrast, placing hands is practiced with a live animal. A further stringency is that waving is practiced both in the case of an item in which there is a living spirit, meaning an animal offering, and in a case of an item in which there is not a living spirit, for example, the Omer offering, the Sota meal offering, and the loaves accompanying a thanks offering, and the ram of the Nazarite, whereas placing hands is only ever performed upon living beings. Okay? That's the Mishnah. And now for the Talmud. Zog the Talmud. Tanu Rabbanon. Korbanot. The Rabbois. Bali Korban Lismicha. The sages taught in the Braita. The verse states with regard to placing hands, and he shall place his hand on the head of his offering. Leviticus 3:2. The term his offering serves to include all of the owners of an offering in the requirement of placing hands, meaning each one must perform it. Shiachol v'haludinhu, b'batzru v'shenisra b'sa b'shchutin, b'spaita b'chorvin, smicha shaloi nisra b'sa b'shchutin, enodin shenispa b'chorvin, Talmud lomar, korbano, l'rabos, it is necessary for the verse to teach us, as one might have thought. Could it not be derived through a kal v'chomer inference that only one partner needs to place his hand on the offering? The inference would be as follows. If the requirement of waving, which was amplified to apply to slaughtered animals, nevertheless was limited with regard to an offering jointly owned by a number of partners, as only one of them waves on behalf of all of them, then with regard to the requirement of placing hands, which was not amplified to apply also to slaughtered animals, is it not logical that it was also limited with regard to an offering jointly owned by partners, and it is sufficient for one partner to place his hands on behalf of the others? To counter this inference, the verse states his offering to include each of the owners of an offering in the requirement of placing hands. This is Rabban Tenufa B'Choverin, Mikal B'Choimer, Umas Micha Shlo Nisra B'So B'Shchutin, Nisra B'So B'Choverin, Tenufa Sh'Nisra B'So B'Shchutin, Eino Din Sh'Nisra B'So B'Choverin. The Gemara asks, but one could suggest the opposite inference and conclude that the requirement of waving should be amplified with regard to partners through the following Kal V'chomer inference. If the requirement of placing hands, which was not amplified to apply also to slaughtered animals, was amplified with regard to an offering jointly owned by partners, requiring each partner to perform it himself, then, with regard to the requirement of waving, which was amplified to apply also to slaughtered animals, is it not logical that it was also amplified with regard to an offering jointly owned by partners, requiring each partner to perform it himself? Mishum de la efshar hechi levad linpu kulehu ba'adi adodi kohab yechatzitzo lanef v'ledao v'lanef tenufa amarachmano v'laitei. The Gemara rejects this inference cannot be correct because it is obvious that only one of the partners needs to perform the waving. It is not possible to have all of them perform it. That's how would it be done. If one says let all the partners wave together, with each one placing his hands under those of another, this is difficult. There would be one moment here. Okay, I remember we were by the word difficult. Yeah, that is difficult. There would be an invalidating interposition between the offering and hands of the partners who are not directly holding onto the offering. And if one says, let one partner wave, and then the next one will wave, and so on, what would also be invalid? That would also be invalid, as the Merciful One states in the Torah that one must perform a waving using a similar noun, which indicates that one waving but not multiple wavings should be performed. Usmicha b'shechutin leisei yotzanan b'zman she'akohen gadol rotze le'aktir haya oila b'kevesh ve'asigan b'yamino higia l'machatzis hakevesh achaz sigan b'yamino והעלהו והושיט לו הראשון והראש והרגל סומך עליהן ויעזור כאן. The Mishnah states that placing hands is not performed upon a slaughtered offering. The Gemara questions this. And is there no instance of placing hands performed on slaughtered animals? But didn't we learn in a Mishnah in Talmud 33b, when the high priest would want to sacrifice a daily offering, as it is his right to be the one to sacrifice it wherever he wishes to, he would ascend the ramp to the top of the altar, and the deputy, Sagan, high priest, would also ascend to the right of the high priest. If it occurred that the high priest reached halfway up the ramp and grew tired, the deputy would hold him by his right hand to assist him, and would bring him up to the top of the altar. And the first of the group of priests who had been selected to bring the limbs of the daily offering to the altar would hold out the head and the right hind leg of the offering to the high priest, who would place his hands upon them, and then he would throw the limbs onto the fire of the altar. שתי ידיים לא ישנו לכהן גדול, סומך עליהם וזעוק כאן. נשמע את השני ולחלוי. כך היו מושיטין לא ישאל כהן ועורים. סומך עליהם וזעוק כאן. Then the second priest, would hold out the two forelegs to the first priest, and the first priest would give them to the high priest, who would place his hands upon them and then throw them onto the fire. At this stage, the second priest would slip away and leave, as he was no longer needed. The first priest remained where he was, and he was still needed to present the other limbs of the offering to the high priest, and in this manner the other priests who had been selected would hold out the rest of all the limbs to the first priest, who would present them to the high priest, who would then place his hands upon them and throw them onto the fire. Uizman shuroitze husomech racherim zokan. The Mishnah concludes, and when the high priest wants, he may merely place his hands upon the limbs, and then the other priests throw the limbs onto the fire of the altar. This Mishnah apparently demonstrates an instance of placing hands performed upon a slaughtered animal. In resolution of this difficulty, Abaye said, in the Mishnah here, the placing of hands is not in fulfillment of the requirement to do so to an offering. Rather, it is done merely due to the eminence of the high priest, so that his sacrifice of the limbs of an offering is more distinguished than when performed by ordinary priests. Hadron alach shtei midos. Maybe we return to you, chapter shtei midos, and now we start the new chapter of shtei halechem. Zog the Mishneh, shtei halechem, shtei halechem, shtei halechem. New chapter. Okay, the Mishnah says shtei halechem nitloshos achas ne'afos achas lechem aponim niloshos achas ne'afos shtayim ובדפוס היה עושה אויסן כשהוא ירודן נוסנן לדפוס כדי שלא יסקלקלו. The Mishnah says the two loaves that are brought on the festival of Shavuot from the new wheat are each made from a tenth of an ephah of fine flour. They are kneaded one by one, and they are baked one by one. Each loaf is placed separately in the oven. The loaves of the showbread are kneaded one by one and baked two by two, meaning two loaves are placed in the oven at the same time. The baker would prepare the showbread in a mold, a dafus, when he made the dough. When he removes the showbread from the oven, he again places the loaves in a mold so that their shape will not be ruined. Okay, that's the Mishnah. And now it's the Talmud. Afraid the Talmud. The Gemara is asking, Minahani Mili. The Mishnah teaches that the two loaves are kneaded one by one and baked one by one. The loaves of the showbread are also kneaded one by one, but are baked two at a time. The Gemara asks, from where are these matters derived? How do we know this? They are derived from a verse, as the sages taught in Braita. The verse states, and you shall take fine flour and bake 12 cakes from it. 2/10 of an ephah shall be in one cake. And you shall set them into arrangements, 6 in an arrangement upon the pure table, before the Lord. Leviticus 24, 5 and 6. The phrase 2/10 of an ephah shall be in one cake teaches that the loaves of the showbread are kneaded one by one. Minayin shavshelechem kach Talmud lomar yeh Minayin she'af yoson 2:2 Talmud lomar Yisam ta'oisam yachoil af shtei halechem kein Talmud lomar osam. The Braita continues, from where is it derived that this is also the halacha with regard to the two loaves, meaning that they are kneaded one at a time. The verse states shall be to include the two loaves. And from where is it derived that the baking of the loaves of the showbread is performed two by two? The verse states, and you shall set them, the plural form indicating that two loaves should be baked together. One might have thought that the two loaves brought on Shavuot should also be baked in this manner. The verse states them, meaning otam, which is a term of exclusion, indicating that only the loaves of the showbread are baked two at a time, but not the two loaves brought on Shavuot. Hai otam ha'apekte imke limekro v'samtam The Gemara asks, didn't you already derive this from the term them? That the showbread must be baked 2 loaves at a time? The Gemara answers, if so, meaning if the term them teaches only that the showbread is baked 2 loaves at a time, let the verse say, and you shall set them, using the shortened form. What is the verse teaching by using the longer form of Visamta Utam? You may learn from the verse 2 matters. Both that the loaves of the showbread should be baked 2 at a time, and that this requirement does not apply to the 2 loaves brought on Shavuot. Tanu Abanu Visamta Isamidafus. Shloish Defusim Heim Noishin Defus Vedai Batsek. Uchumin Defus Hayalo Batano. כשהוא דרודה נתנה בתפוס כדי שלא תתקלקל ולהדרה לדפוס כמה כיוון דאפלה נפחה. The Mishnah teaches that the showbread was placed in a mold, and with regard to this, the sages taught in the Brisa, the verse states, and you shall set them, Leviticus 24:6, which means set them in a mold. There are 3 molds that are used in the temple in the preparation of loaves. First, the baker places the showbread in a mold while it is still dough. Second, there was a type of mold for the showbread in the oven in which the loaves are baked. And when he removes the showbread from the oven, he places it in a 3rd mold so that its shape will not be ruined. The Gemara asks, but why is the 3rd mold necessary? Then return the showbread to the 1st mold in which the dough was kneaded. The Gemara answers, once the dough is baked, it rises and no longer fits into the 1st mold. Okay, continuing on. Itmar, it was stated, how is the showbread prepared? In what shape? Itmar lechem apanim ketzad oisin oisoi. Okay, now 94b, Rabbi Chanina Amal, Kemin teva prutzo. Rabbi Yochanan Amal, Kemin spina rokedes. Rabbi Chanina says it was rectangular with a wide base. We're talking about 94b now. Rabbi Chanina says it was rectangular with a wide base and 2 parallel walls, with an open space between them like a box that is open on 2 sides. Rabbi Yochanan says that the showbread was like a rocking boat, meaning a triangular shaped boat with a narrow base from which 2 walls rise at angles. Since the boat does not have a wide base, it rocks from side to side. Okay, we'll stop here and continue with the next Amud.